Connie Coleman-Lackady,
Present.
Don Daniels,
Here.
James Guerrero,
Here.
Nancy Hudson-Eccles,
Present.
Ryan Pearson,
Here.
Paul Wagaman,
Present.
and Christopher Weber is excused. You have quorum.
Great. Before us, we have the minutes. Ooh, a lot of echo up here. Sorry. We have the minutes of February 5th, 2020. Looking for a motion.
I move that we accept the minutes from the last meeting.
Mr. Guerrero first and Mr. Wagon second. Any discussion? Hearing or seeing none at this time. All those in favor by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, minutes pass as written. Any changes to our agenda?
No, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Number 5 already, Glenn, public comment. Okay, welcome, come on up and,
We missed you last time.
Didn't get it written down.
right on.
I'll give you enough tonight. though.
Okay, good.
Glenn Spaeth, Lakewood. First thing is, back when we voted to become a city, one of the principal ideas was to stop the county from inserting multifamily apartment houses everywhere in Lakewood. And I don't know if many of you, a few do, but remember that, but that was the case. And that was one of the main reasons I voted for cityhood, because apartments were going everywhere. Right now, I've got probably 3,000 apartments within a 3-block area of my place. You know, enough is enough. There's Echelon Apartments, there's all kinds at Sealy Lake, across the street from Sealy Lake, across the street at Bridgeport. They're just all over, and up the street on Stilican Boulevard. Anyway, that's one of the points that I wanted to make. Second one, I don't care much for a 7-Eleven going in next door to me on Bridgeport. I think that's the worst option that I can think of because of the crime, the drugs, the lowlifes that run through there, and have that across the street from a skate park or a kids park is something else. Also, the driveways go right out onto Stilican Boulevard within about 70 feet of the intersection, which is not kosher according to the developmental code that you signed in December. Along with that, a business is supposed to maintain about the same kinds of hours of operation. 7-Eleven is 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Big floodlights, cars coming and going. Stilican Boulevard and Bridgeport are already a racetrack, drag racetrack, all hours of the day and night. And we're just asking for more in the way of wrecks. And I've seen a lot of major wrecks at that intersection. Also at 59th, which is just one block up. So I don't know what you can do now, but I assume that there's a lot of things that get permission from the city to do that violates the developmental codes, because there's probably 4 or 5 at least that don't comply with the developmental codes that were just signed and went into effect in January. So I hope we can limit the apartments. Now, there's lots of space out here in the town center, and I think that ought to be the first place that those kinds of high-rise, 8-story or more, I've said that 16-story buildings are not that difficult. And you got less land, you got more occupancy, and, but I don't know that we're ready for that yet. But anyway, thank you.
Thank you for your comments, appreciate it. Seeing no other individuals out there to speak to us tonight, we'll move on to unfinished business. And I'll close the public comments at this time, though, first. I need a little, reminder of things. We've had such a long time off, and so, and thank you for the fellow commissioners for voting me in without me being here. I appreciate that. I don't know if I really, oh, no, that's okay.
We knew you wouldn't object.
Yeah, okay, great, thank you so much, yes, appreciate it. So we'll move to, there is no unfinished business, and number 7, no public hearing tonight, so we move right to number 8, new business, the discussion regarding the 2020 Comprehensive Plan zoning map amendment cycle.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the Planning Commission. Tiffany Spear here this evening to present to you the package of the proposed comprehensive plan amendments for this cycle. There are a few changes since you saw the packet initially last fall that was then taken over to City Council for review. And so most of this will be somewhat familiar, but there are a few additions and one proposed consolidation. So I'm just going to walk through the actual document itself that's in your packet, starting on page 6. So we'll go that route. So on page 6, you'll see the schedule there. Tonight is the discussion that you will have. Your next meeting, March 4th, is when the public hearing is going to be held. That's been duly noticed, and so people, I assume, will be here to testify. Action is then for you on April 1st, if you're ready to take action, and then it will move on to the City Council. At this point, it's tentative that the city would be taking, or the council would be taking action around the 1st of June. And the intent is, this is a little bit earlier than it has been in past years. This year is a budget year for the council, and so they've requested that other things get in front of them faster so they can start really concentrating on the budget. So that's why the schedule is what it is. Following the schedule, you'll see there a discussion of the 8 criteria that are generally used to analyze every comprehensive plan amendment request. First of all, is it consistent with the comp plan? Is the amendment and subsequent development of the site compatible with development in the vicinity? Does would the proposed amendment not unduly burden the transportation system, which can't be mitigated? Will it not unduly burden public services and facilities? Will it not adversely affect public health, safety, and general welfare? And then, is the range of uses being requested in a zoning reclassification more appropriate than those in the existing classification? Has there been a change in circumstances since the current zoning has been put in place? And then, are the negative impacts largely outweighed by the advantages? Most of the applications this year, it was easily the analysis under those criteria was easily done, but there were a couple that the staff approached differently just because of the nature of the application. You had a total, of 13 applications this time around. When you saw it, I believe the number was 10, and so there were several more that were added by the City Council itself when they took action last fall. But I'll walk through these one by one. The first is something that you had seen last fall. It was a change to the planned development district density allowed in the R1 and single family, the residential estate and the single family zone, but that's now been expanded to amend some other sections within the comprehensive plan. And so after this chart that we're looking at right now, you'll see the full language of what's being proposed. The idea here is to make the comprehensive plan consistent as what has been administered by current planning in this Community and Economic Development Department for a few years now, because there's been a change to 18A that isn't necessarily reflected 100% in the comprehensive plan. So we're going back and fixing that unintentional inconsistency. Then you'll see number 2, which is a privately initiated amendment. It would rezone and reclassify 3 parcels on Custer, at the intersection of Custer and Bridgeport, and I'll show you maps of these in just a moment. The second one related to Bridgeport is, I'm sorry, this is jumping. technical difficulties, my apologies. At the corner of 111th and Bridgeport, this would also be a rezone and redesignation. It's from, it's for 4 different parcels and redesignating them to multifamily, rezoning them to multifamily 3. Then you have on the corner of 59th and Stillicum, a much larger, meaning higher number of parcels involved, moving things to high-density multifamily and then multifamily 1 designation, or zone, excuse me. 2020-6 is actually the same one as you saw in 2019-6. This is the Springbrook neighborhood. And if you remember, this is the one that the council first of all, the Planning Commission and then the council ultimately decided to take no action on last cycle because there was an ongoing internal and FEMA coordinated review of the floodplain within that area of the city. We're now at the point where initial data has come back to the Public Works and Engineering Department, but they don't have the final done yet. So as it sits, we're still asking that the proposal maybe wait until those final pieces of information come back from FEMA. And that may or may not mean it's included in this year's cycle. It just depends on how long it takes at the FEMA desk. Oops, sorry again. So number 7 is Bridgeport Way and 123rd. This is a city-initiated amendment for 1 parcel. And this is one that we would actually suggest be combined with the larger Springbrook parcel consideration. It's one of them, but it wasn't included in last year's package. So it's just a kind of a Scrivener's correction to make sure we've got all of that area within Springbrook that would be affected by the FEMA reconsideration. Number 8 is at Washington Boulevard in Interlochen. It's a redesignation and rezone of 1 parcel to mixed residential and then mixed residential to zone. Number 9 is the Lakewood Transit Station parcel itself. It's just a single parcel, or 2 parcels, but the building is the only thing really being affected. Changing that to public institutional to reflect the fact that it is the transit station there. Number 10 goes back to PDDs. This is text amendment again within the comprehensive plan. This is updating and adding a new policy to the land use policy chapter, talking about encouraging PDDs with higher densities provided. It is incorporating innovative site design, conservation of natural land features, protection of critical area buffers, using low-impact development or LID techniques, conservation of energy, and the efficient use of open space. So this is just identifying within the comprehensive plan the fact that a PDD is expected to perform and look a little bit beyond what standard code would require. This is saying if you're going to get these special conditions within your PDD, you're going to have to provide more to the city in exchange. Number 11, 12, and 13 all came from the City Council's conversation, and they're all related to rail policy. The first one, number 11, would remove an outdated policy T18.4, examining the potential of unused or underutilized rail lines. Number 12 would add the phrase "and Joint Base Lewis-McChord" to policy 18.6, so showing that those rails are recognized as serving not only the city itself, but also the base. And then a new policy T18.10, talking about discouraging any increase to freight traffic within the corridor, and also talking about I'll just read it. The opening of the Point Defiance bypass project in support of the Amtrak passenger rail, coupled with increasing demands on freight rail, there's concern that the Point Defiance bypass project could eventually lead to increased freight traffic in addition to new passenger rail. So just saying, not only do we not want additional passenger trains, but the freight is also discouraged. So those are the 12 or 13 amendments in summary. What you'll also see on the right-hand column that I haven't yet mentioned in this table is the department's recommendation. So going back to the very top, all of them are recommended approval except for 2. First is the 2020-6 Springbrook neighborhood one. That's the recommendation to wait and see what happens with the FEMA finalization and whether that will work into the 2020 cycle process or not. The next one after that is the suggestion that this get combined, so number 7, combining that with number 6 since it's all Springbrook. And then there's going to be one more I'll show you later on that's just a refinement to what zone and designation something would get redesignated to. This is a map that shows where all of the various amendments are located this time around. And then you'll also see that little inset box shows you the amount of acreage that each one includes. So amendment number 2, for instance, that's up on the corner, as I mentioned, of Custer and Bridgeport, it's 3 acres. Amendment 3, which is just below it, is about 17 acres. Number 4, which is down south just above Interstate 5, is 2.83 acres. Number 5, which is back up between Lakewood Drive Southwest and then John Dower and Bridgeport, excuse me, is about 19 acres. Number 6, which is down below I-5 in Springbrook, that's the biggie, is about 44 acres. Number 7, as you see, is immediately adjacent to that, is almost 3. Number 8, which is over by Washington Boulevard and Interlochen, is a 2.3 acre site. And then number 9, which is that Sound Transit Station, 1 building, 2 parcels, is about 4.8 acres. Oops. Sorry, I did it again.
Just 1 minute, Ms. Eccles.
So Custer and Bridgeport, you have A and B, and you're
Yes.
saying it's 3 acres and 17 acres. So we have 20 acres on the Custer and Bridgeport. Can you tell me ultimately how many units could be built there?
It depends on, and I should clarify, A and B simply is because they're both the corner of Bridgeport and Custer. They are 2 separate applications. The first one is actually something that Mr. Guerrero is involved in. Maybe he can talk to, if he wants to, how many units are anticipated
A or
there.
B?
The second one, though, that number 3, this is a parcel that is already there, multifamily, and no change is proposed to zoning. And at this point, it would just fall within the general range of the multifamily zone that it's in. There's no development specific to it that's proposed. So we would have to just look at whichever multifamily zone it is, what the range is. That's the best answer I could give you right now.
But multifamily, are you looking at duplexes? You're looking at apartments?
With multifamily 2 zoning, which is on that parcel right now, we would have to look at the range of what's allowed within that. And I can't tell you off the top of my head. I'll have to look at it really quick and try to get you an answer. But that, it's already zoned that. This was an error where the designation, the future land use map wasn't changed to be in coordination with the zone, so this is just fixing that. But it is MF2 as of right now.
Currently, apartments currently,
Could go there.
and they're currently apartments now.
Yeah, there's no specific change to
Change,
what development is
right.
there. It's
It's already
nothing but a
Yeah,
redesignation on paper. And then I don't know, Mr. Guerrero, if you wanted to say anything or not.
Well, I did want to ask if, so I am the architect of record for item number 2, ask if I should be recusing myself from the discussion on that.
Tonight is not taking action, so I think we're
As
okay.
long as that's,
Yeah.
So that the project 2020-02 is proposed to be multifamily. There are single-family residences on it now. And I may not be able to quote the exact number of units. I think it's 30, if I'm not mistaken, that we're proposing.
How many? 30.
And the property immediately to the south that Ms. Spear was talking about actually exists as apartments. What they're doing is just making sure the comp plan matches what is actually
And it's already
existing.
built there.
It is
Yes.
built, yeah,
Okay. So they're not going to add
But the
additional
single
units.
family are gonna become multifamily.
correct.
Which
If
could be
if
apartments.
number 2 can be apartment. The proposal for number 2 is to change the zoning to allow for apartments. Yes.
But you said 60.
I said
30. Okay.
Approximately.
Okay,
And
okay.
if you'd like, I can clarify what our plan shows. That's my
Okay.
recollection.
Okay,
I recall that as well from the application.
okay.
Yeah. So this map actually shows you then where both 2 and 3 are located. Number 2 would cover, I don't know if you can see my little cursor there moving around on the screen, but those 3 parcels where my, I don't know if you call that an X, is moving, would change that. And then down here, the zone would remain the same, but the land use designation would be changed to match it. So everything of this area would be the multifamily 2. Yes? Does that make sense? Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah. Number 4 is, again, taking it from, in this case, it's corridor commercial to multifamily, and then commercial 1 to multifamily 3 zone. This is the map where it's located just by street. So it's where 111th and 112th come together over to 47th Avenue Southwest. And there's actually 4 parcels involved, but you can see one of them is extremely skinny and is not buildable, but it is, for whatever reason, its own parcel there. And then to show you the surrounding zoning, this is, again, that same area. And so right here where my cursor is, that's 111th and 112th coming together. So these 3 parcels are getting redesignated and rezoned. And they would then in turn match the brown that's around it. Continuing through unless there's any questions. The 5th one is on the corner of 59th and Stillicum, and this is a really funky shaped application, but there's some logic behind the shape of it just because of the way the streets are laid out. This is going to rezone, I think it's 23 parcels. From neighborhood business district to high density multifamily, and then rezone from neighborhood commercial 2 to multifamily 1. And if you were to look at surrounding zoning to those parcels, we're down here now, and it's this area, and down. So taking that out of neighborhood commercial 2, that really bright pink, and changing it to multifamily 1, which is this stuff over here, this color. And you can see there that the range for density would be up to 22 dwelling units per acre. It would take away the ability to put commercial development on those lots because of it would become just a strictly residential zone. Number 6 is Springbrook, and again, that's the biggie. I'll just go directly to the zoning one here. So if you look at the path down below I-5, it's all of this area down into this brown area as well, and then that next amendment that we were suggesting be combined is this one where you see a little bit of the water moving over, the riparian buffer. So all of this brown right here and then this red up here is what's involved. And one more time, this is the one where we're just waiting to see what the outcome is regarding flood potential and floodway and what the flood risk is in here for everyone to be able to make recommendations and make decisions as to how that should be possibly rezoned. Number 7 is just this single parcel. Talked about it already, adding that into number 6 with the Springbrook proposal. Number 8, that corner lot on the corner of Washington and Interlochen, changing it from neighborhood business district to mixed residential. And this is one that's been neighborhood business district for a while, but it really hasn't developed within that type of zoning. And so taking a look at that, staff has made the recommendation that it get rezoned. You see it's the only one in there that's neighborhood commercial. And the idea here is to take it to MF2. MF2 is, going to provide, again, an opportunity for maybe some medium density residential development.
I have a question if I could.
Sure.
On that particular parcel. I noticed on the conditions, the analysis of that piece of property, number C, transportation impacts and mitigation. It's kind of, it says they don't anticipate to result in any significant difference transportation impacts on that corner of Washington and Interlochen. I know at the second part of it, they would have to mitigate the impacts to the area road network. But that intersection is just a disaster waiting to happen. So you're saying basically they would have to meet any traffic and mitigation on both sides, Washington Boulevard, Interlochen, and address that intersection, that stop sign getting off from Interlochen onto Washington. They would have to either put a traffic light or do whatever on that property is.
Yeah, there's basically two parts to this answer for you, and I'll give it a go. Apologies in advance
No
if I
problem.
butcher this. But essentially, you've got a parcel that's already zoned neighborhood commercial 1. So it anticipates whatever development would have occurred within that zone would have mitigated, but also had transportation results at an NC1 level. Taking it from NC1 to MF2, what the staff is saying is that there wouldn't be a huge difference in the amount of traffic between NC1 and MF2 development. So that's part 1. Part 2 is, regardless of whichever zone it is, so if we do rezone it to MF2, any specific project would have to mitigate any transportation impacts, just as anything would under NC1. So whether or not that is a 100% accurate statement, I can go back and verify, but that's what was provided. So again, it's saying between the change, there's not a huge delta between the two zones in terms of traffic, but regardless of what zone it is, mitigation would be required.
So you mean to tell me that if a commercial 1, a business in some commercial would be on that property versus having 35 to 63 additional apartments or living units, there wouldn't be that much of a significant difference in traffic?
The assumption that is saying is whatever the business is going to have so many trips per day, right? Single family, the assumption is 1 peak PM hour trip. So if you have 30 to 60 units, 30 to 60 trips. Depending on the business within this neighborhood commercial, you may have 30 to 60 trips within that time as well, is the assumption that was included in that statement.
Okay.
I see the skepticism, and I can go back and verify that.
Thank you. And-
Yeah, I will do that, okay. Does that answer your question? Okay. Okay, so again, 2020-09 is the one that's the 2 parcels where the Lakewood Transit Station is located. Kind of a funky couple of parcels right along Pacific, and then Interstate 5 is just to the south of that. And this is the parcels where the building itself is located, and I believe maybe the crosswalk or something, and that's why it's 2 parcels. But in any event, it's just to redesignate those as public institutional, given the nature of the building that's on there. It's not going anywhere anytime soon. So what you see here, the cursor now, it's this long parcel, and then the one that's right above it, kind of a wedge shape up here, but that's what we're talking about, changing to blue to be public institutional. No change to the use of it is anticipated. This is strictly a land use planning on paper kind of exercise, just to be consistent with what is currently there. The following 4 are all text, so again, they're there in your packet, but this is talking about PDDs in number 10, and then the 11, 12, and 13, if you recall, are the rail policies. So all of that information is there for you. I do want to go back and touch on one of these really quickly. And I believe it is... Sorry, bear with me, please. Oh, for heaven's sakes, I'll find it before the end of the evening, but there was one where the application originally suggested, there it is, I'm sorry, it's number 2. So again, Mr. Guerrero, there was an original discussion even before this was submitted about what could potentially be done on this property. And the way this was submitted, it was changing the zoning from MR2 to MF3. The recommendation from staff on this one is to actually go to MF2 versus high density, and then MF3 as the zone rather than MF2. Does that make sense? I apologize if it doesn't. If we go to page 18 of your packet, you'll see what I'm talking about. So at the very end there, you'll see approval of redesignating the parcels to MF, multifamily, and rezoning to MF2. I'm sorry, I got it backwards, which is why it made no sense. So multifamily and multifamily 2 versus high density and multifamily 3, which is what was originally applied for. And what that does is limit the range, and given what was anticipated on the project, it made sense to do MF2 in any event. So,
Great.
correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Guerrero. Is that right? Okay. So unless there's questions on any of these applications, where we sit is, in the next meeting, there will be a public hearing on all of these, and then the commission would have one and possibly 2 meetings where they wanted to talk about this, suggest any amendments to the proposal and the recommendation as they sit. And then if you're ready to do so, come April 1st, you would be passing this along to the full council.
Any other questions? Oh, Mr. Wegeman.
No, do we have any comments from out in the community about this already? Have you heard any rumblings?
We've not heard anything, no.
You know, I mean, we were briefed last week that we need more places for people to live. So with the big push last week, or last meeting, was more multifamily. Mr. Spieth spoke up tonight saying, why are we doing this? You know, I'll put my hand up and say, when we first put this planning commission together, we talked about what are we going to do with the whole concept of Growth Management Act, and we said we're going to follow the Growth Management Act, and so that says that we got to have more spaces for people to live. So I had a conversation with a citizen today that's kind of frustrated with that. He thought that the goal of our community should be to have more single-family dwellings and not have all the apartments. So that puts us then in a direct conflict with the Growth Management Act. But when this committee's first, I asked that question, are we going to follow that? And we kind of decided we would follow the Growth Management Act. So here we are.
That's right. Stuff, Mr. Guerrero?
Yeah, and I would echo that. I look at it more in a big picture. That's just kind of the way I am. And I think of it like we are being told from the state that we're going to have more people just in Washington. So we're going to have to house them in our state. Where do we want to house them? Do we want to house them in the unincorporated areas or in the urban areas? And technically, we're an urban area. And my thought is that really we do want the people to come to our cities so that we don't take over the rest of the land that's available for agriculture or natural resources. And so I understand the concern about packing people into our city and putting them in apartments and multifamily places, but to my way of thinking, it actually is the right thing to do. And so that's why I'm in support of it. Not to say, and obviously it's part of my livelihood that I do this too, so, but I actually think intrinsically it makes some sense that that's where we put our people.
Then we're stuck, right, a little bit. So then the question is, how do we do this? How do we make livable cities, you know, where are people going to walk? You know, to me, when we talked last meeting a little bit about the Lakewood Station area, that to me, shoot, I don't know, we're close to the runways there as we get closer over there, so I don't know how high we can go vertically, you know, because you got missed approach, they're not on the end of the runways, but, you know, if you spin people around to get back in the traffic pattern, I don't know how high we can go, if there's any rules on that.
We're not in air corridor zones there, to my knowledge. comes off of the ends of the runway is not.
That's the only area we got an issue. So then that, to me, is the place to start building it, so you can, since we spent all this money on this rail, we ought to see if we can get some benefit out of it, at least from my perspective.
Or in strategic areas like here, the town center, I mean, that's realistic wise, I think that's what the more citizens are, thinking is, hey, let's use this here, urban living, walkable, build here, and then when they see it in their neighborhood, no one wants it in their neighborhood, it's hard to balance them. But for some reason, the people that have the properties available, they see an opportunity to have a developer come in and they can sell their property and maximize kind of both density and be awarded to sell their property, so it's a tough deal.
And just to give you a heads up, as a planning commission, the city, or the state, excuse me, legislature right now is looking at a number of bills that would actually potentially mandate increasing density in single-family areas and requiring jurisdictions to say, within a single-family district, you now will allow duplexes, triplexes, quads, up to sixplexes.
Yeah.
And the idea there is affordable housing concerns, densification concerns, to keep from drawing further out and further out and further out and increasing traffic congestion. So
Yeah, I
we'll
saw
see if
that.
any of that passes this session.
Yeah, no kidding, I saw that, and I like, oh, great, we do all this work.
I know you're pretty
And then
political.
all of a sudden is they vote and saying, okay, now, single family, you can
Yeah.
have up to a sixplex.
Right.
And intermix in the, single family housing.
As you go down this road, I had a conversation with a mortgage officer today, and she's pretty doom and gloom, because there's people who can't qualify for loans anymore. And it was interesting, I was at Day on the Hill with a school board member, and Chris Reichdahl was talking about, he says, we're finally to the place now where we have parents that still haven't paid off their student loans, that have children that are now picking up their student loans. So we're in, certainly as a country, we're in a dilemma as far as debt, but the people that are living here are maxed. The mortgage loan officer just said, I just can't believe where people are credit card debt. And because it's pretty easy money now to, get your equity out of your house, people are doing that like crazy, and she feels that the place is going to crash. She feels that we're back to 2008 again. That's I came away from that meeting pretty doom and gloom.
Right on.
I said, thank you for the good news.
Yeah. Any other comments for Tiffany? Ms. Connie?
Well, I know we keep saying affordable housing. We're doing all this for affordable housing, but who's it affordable for? It really isn't affordable for the people that need to have affordable housing. I mean, we keep building these multiplexes or multifamily places, but really, when you look at the people that need a place to live and want to start a family or whatever, it's not necessarily affordable. And you keep calling it affordable housing. And we keep putting it in places where it's not going to be affordable for most people. For the people that live in this city.
17%
same.
of the city of Lakewood is below the poverty line.
Yeah.
Huh?
17% of the city is below the poverty line.
Exactly. And yet so could we
Not
have?
me, not
No.
me.
So could we have poverty affordable?
That
housing?
would be called subsidized housing, and that is handled in a different way than the market rate housing is
Exactly.
held. Yeah.
So it's,
Yep, it's a tough deal.
it is what it is. But, I mean, it's not affordable housing when you look at the population of the city of Lakewood.
What is also happening within the city is the ongoing work to preserve existing housing. And there's a couple of different ways to look at it, I guess. First of all, by preserving the existing housing stock, whether the same inhabitants are in it or not, you have that already built, developed land and property available at whatever price point. The newer construction may be occupied by people that are moving out of those. They don't want the single-family house anymore, and they want to either downsize, or maybe it's multi-generational and a single house wants to split up and the younger people are off on their own. So by adding more variety and more volume of housing, whatever type it is, you're kind of breaking out opportunities for people at various levels. Talking about whether you're below the poverty level or just below area median income, it is also just trying to figure out, by adding more into the mix, the more total number of housing units, whether they're single-family detached or some kind of multifamily, by adding more of them, are the rents going to go down a little bit? Are the vacancy rates going to increase so there's more spots? That's the thought process behind all of this planning. Whether or not it pans out, I can't tell you. But that's the idea.
Can you keep building it so that there's so many that the supply and demand equation changes so that they'll drop the rent?
That's the idea.
Yeah.
That's the idea.
And then
It
taxes
doesn't usually
go
happen.
up, and then they have to raise the rent up because
Exactly.
the property taxes are elevated. So we got the distinction of Lakewood having the highest in Pierce County increase in the property taxes. So we're number one for, some things. And I don't know if that's really what we want to be, but
I call it the alligator economy, and you guys saw in the last meeting that it was actually included in Mr. Buer's thing, but it's the fact that income is going like this and housing prices is going like that. And that gap continues to grow, that alligator's mouth continues to open, and how to solve that problem is beyond all of us, I think.
So,
go ahead, Ms. Connie.
so I guess we could celebrate that we don't have tent cities.
Not under the Growth Management Act, sorry.
That's right. Yep.
All right.
Any other comments for Tiffany? All right. Thank you so much. And we'll go to reports from the council. Mr. Boki, you have any comments for us tonight?
Thank you very much, Mr. Daniels. I'm glad to be here. I'm Paul Boki, Councilmember Boki, and I have the privilege of being the council liaison for at least, I think, this year for the Planning Commission. There's a couple of things I want to, first of all, in advance, thank you for the hard work on working through these comp plan amendments. I mean, I think you've touched on tonight at least a few of the challenges. I mean, when these came to council, I was like, oh my goodness, there's some tough calls in here. And also the Lakewood Station District Sub-Area Plan, which we're embracing and we're hoping for great things. I think the idea there is much like the downtown plan, that nothing will happen overnight, but that we're taking advantage of the asset, several assets actually there in that area, besides the train station and the bus. It's near an employment center and with the hospital and whatnot. And then we also have Pack Highway and Interstate 5. And so there's a lot of assets there. So interested to see the results of that. The entire council is. Correct me if I'm running into problems. Interlochen was brought up. We realized that Interlochen is a problem. I spoke to the school board and said, we're fixing it in 2021. That's not assured. Actually, we're combining all of the Washington Boulevard with the last portion of Gravelly Lake Drive from Washington to Nyanza in one big project. We have money set aside for it, or we will have money set aside for that. But we're also looking for some federal money to help us with Washington. So it'll be for Lakewood, it'll be a massive project if the money all comes together. The question is then, if it doesn't come together, especially on the federal side, what will we do first? We'll probably do Gravelly Lake because that's our money, and but we'll see, and hopefully that will get fixed because we all realize that that's an issue. I believe the idea is that there'll be a roundabout there. I do want to speak to you touched on my favorite subject. we're in the Vision 2050. There is, with the Puget Sound Regional Council, and at that level, there has been expressed by members of the Pierce County delegation, which would include people from Pierce County, but also from the constituent cities, and probably from the other outlying counties, Snohomish and Kitsap, that there's a continuation in the Vision 2050 plan of what was in the Vision 2040 plan and which was in previous plans, which is King County gets a lot of the jobs, but the expectation is that a lot of the people will live in other counties. This has now been challenged, and you can see why. I mean, we have whole communities really in Pierce County. You hear about Tahali, which is a huge development residential development near Bonnie Lake. I would guess that probably 70 to 80% of those people work in King County, right? So in increasing numbers, I think there was an article in the paper the other day about the number of people who actually live in North Tacoma now and commute to Seattle. So there's real concern within the elected ranks in Pierce County about, this imbalance between jobs and residential areas. So what's King County has done is they with gusto created their UGA very tight, their urban growth area, and made housing really tough to build and very expensive to build. And so, but they want all the jobs. So, there's so that battle is going on, and I'm understanding by people who are involved that actually some progress has been made. But this does impact us here because we're being asked to, at some level, to take more people. It's 72,000 now, I think, in reading in that, and it'll probably be somewhat more, depending on what the other cities want to do and what the unincorporated areas of in the UGA want to do. More on that going forward, but those debates are being had and they impact you. And clearly, what we've done, and you talked about density, is I think for a long time in Lakewood it was an either or. It was either big, houses on big lots. Not necessarily big houses on big lots, but houses on big lots and apartments. And so our attempts with the PDD and the cottage housing ordinance, the PDD is actually going forward. We're actually starting to see some developments based on the PDD. I think there's 2 right now that are in process, not without controversy, by the way. But there are 2 happening now, one in Oak Brook and one in at Veterans Drive in Gravelly Lake. We're hopeful, because we're trying to get folks to understand and as a body trying to write laws so that density does not equal bad things, right? The density can actually be a good thing. I mean, if you look at DuPont, I think I was told years ago that most of DuPont was built at 12 to an acre, right? Which is well in excess of, I live in Oak Brook and that's R3, and you could go 6 to an acre. And you've been involved in other debates about anything more than 2 is a bad thing, right? I mean, it kind of shows that that doesn't have to be that way. We don't have to have those kind of arguments. Those are arguments that are now, I think, passé, because if you either want big apartment complexes or we need to find ways to do that middle, that kind of density without going, hopefully, the way the legislature wants to go, which is just kind of this ad hoc statewide zoning, which is, you can put 6plexes or triplexes right next door to you for no reason at all, and we don't know how that will look, and that will create all sorts of other issues for us. So I hope that helps a little bit, that what you're going through and what you're facing is I'm sympathetic to it because it's exactly what a lot of other cities in the area are doing. So I'll leave it at that, and if you have any questions for me, I can try to answer them.
Any questions for Mr. Boki? No, I appreciate it. Thank you. How about from staff?
I will just jump down to a couple of things for future agenda topics. Next meeting, as I mentioned, is the hearing on the comprehensive plan package that we just went through. And then the following meeting after that, once upon a time, you talked about the Shoreline Master Program, yes? And if you recall, there was a discussion about the restoration plan, and there was going to be this annual presentation of restoration activities. That will be on March 18th. We'll get to do that for the first time. So we'll have the Chambers Clover Creek Watershed Council and potentially other groups coming and providing you an update. And then based on that, the Planning Commission would be deciding, is there a need to update the restoration plan itself? So either it'll be just fun and informational, or it'll be something that starts some action that would then go on to council. So that'll happen in March, and then in April, taking action on the comprehensive plan package. And then the other thing I would mention is that in your packet, starting on page 52, just for your reference, is a quick status update regarding the buildable lands report. We've beat housing to death here. We're not going to do it anymore tonight. But this is there for your reference. The fact that next year, 2021, is the next time a buildable lands report is due. Really quickly, the city right now is working with the county that's gathering all the information from all of the jurisdictions about how they have physically developed and whether that compares favorably or not to what they are planning to have developed. So we'll bring more of that to you as we get closer to actual adoption of that plan. That's it, thank you.
Anyone have questions for Ms. Tiffany? I do have one question, is I hear ads on the radio about Lakewood in Build Better.
Oh, Build Your Better Here?
Is that Lakewood, our Lakewood?
Yes, it is.
It really doesn't clarify. I didn't know if that was King County Lakewood or our Lakewood or Lakewood, Colorado, or it didn't clarify. It just says Lakewood, and so I'm driving in Lakewood. I assume it's our Lakewood, but it didn't clarify, so I.
It is. Yeah, and what I can do is send you a link to a couple of pieces of information that's been issued by the communications department here at the city. It is a branding campaign that's getting going, talking about the different types of people, the different types of businesses that would see the benefit to being and working here.
So it's, what's the branding? What's the Build Better?
Build your better here.
Build your
Whatever
better
your better, quote, better might be, whether it's jobs, whether it's your home, whether it's education, whatever it happens to be. So I'm happy to send you some more information about that.
No, I thought it was well put together, but I just didn't, like I said, I assumed it was. It's our Lakewood.
It
so
is,
there.
yes, and
Okay.
there's videos that make that really clear, but maybe they didn't
Okay.
even think they needed to say
On the radio,
Washington.
yeah, you're just,
Sure.
They should maybe stick in Pierce County?
well, yeah, who knows? I mean, King County is gonna probably take all the glory for it, you know.
That's right,
they'll-
that's right.
So, no
Kind of
problem.
like that golf tournament that happened near Seattle, right?
Any other comments from fellow commissioners? Mr. Wegman?
Here on the 4th.
You will not be here on the 4th, okay? We'll just have to make sure we tell staff, because there is a public hearing, so we want to make sure we have a quorum for the 4th. I know I will be here, and so,
You 5 have to cover it.
that's all right.
March 4th or April 4th?
No, March,
The public hearing is March 4th, yes.
so. Hearing or seeing no other comments, we'll call the meeting adjourned.
Thank you.